Creating Culture. What makes your company special with David Ciccarelli. David Ciccarelli was born and raised in Thunder Bay and is the co-founder and CEO of Voices.com, the online marketplace that connects business people with professional voice talent. The unique blending of his audio engineering background with self-taught business savvy and website development afforded David the creative freedom to pursue his passion for innovation through the first .com boom, the result of which catapulted him onto the scene as a pioneer in the field in the early 2000s. David has been running a web business since 2002 and has helped over 125,000 voice actors showcase their talent. Over the past 10 years, David, with the help of his team, has grown Voices.com from the ground up to become a leader in the industry. Please welcome to the stage our hometown success story and internet entrepreneur, David Ciccarelli.
Thanks, guys. Great to be here. And I am fully aware that I am the only thing standing in between you and lunch. So I will tell you a great story more than anything else. My main message for you is that every company, no matter how big or small, can create a sustainable competitive advantage by focusing internally on your organization's culture. Now let me tell you a story. You see, it actually all began at the turn of the millennium, when many of you were probably worried about whether or not your computers would switch over into, and they would the clocks would roll over, and that everything would work out okay with your computer, and that planes wouldn't be falling from the sky, if you remember that, all that mayhem. And meanwhile, I was actually at school. I was actually learning how to become an audio engineer. Bit of a nerd that way. In fact, I learned how to record, mix, and edit and produce music and sound for the world's broadcast productions at a school that looked, frankly, a lot like this bridge of the Starship Enterprise. When I graduated from school, I was dead set on creating a small business, a recording studio. I actually launched it initially in the basement of my parents' house and then moved back down to London, Ontario. And there I actually, speaking of the power of the media and the public relations, I actually got my name in the newspaper on my birthday, of all days. This is where it gets a little bit interesting. You see, Stephanie, my wife, who I had yet to meet, my wife-to-be, she was a classically trained singer. She would sing at special events and funerals and weddings and so forth. And you see, her mom actually was, I think, a little sick and tired of carpooling her around at all these events and doing auditions and so forth. And so her mom cut this newspaper article out and left it on her bed and said, "This guy looks trustworthy." Apparently, she thought I was good enough for her daughter that she should come in and record some sample recordings of her voice and get them put onto a demo CD. Well, her mom, being the great mother that she is, of course, you would have to say that about all mothers-in-law, she chaperoned her daughter, Stephanie, down into our recording studio, and we just hit it off right away. And what was amazing is that because of that same newspaper article, there were other local businesses in the city of London that actually wanted a voiceover. There was a hair salon that wanted some local radio commercials. There was even an event management company that actually wanted some voiceovers for their phone system. And both of them wanted a female voice. And being a bit of a nerd, as I say, I actually didn't know any girls. So I called Stephanie up and I said, "Do you think that you could come down and read this page of copy?" And the way I tell the story is that I said that we would split the money. She never remembers that part, but I said that we would split the money. And we ended up officially we were in business together. Well, you wouldn't believe that, and I should insert that this is as much of a love story between the two of us as a startup story, because Stephanie, if she were up here, she would interject that this was around the time that she likes to say it got romantic, which I think is her short form for saying that we got married and now we have, yes, 4 kids. No one ever told me how that whole thing worked, but now I know how the kids come about. But nonetheless, we realized that as we progressed, that we started doing voiceovers for all kinds of other applications, myself as the engineer and Stephanie as the voice talent. And one of the first smart things we did was actually build a website. we went down to the local library and took out Web Design for Dummies. Now, of course, you've all heard about the wonderful tools that are available for you now, as well as access to professionals within that area. But going back 10 years, this was, generally speaking, a new field. So we taught ourselves how to build our own website. And before long, there were people from all around North America that would find this website, freelance voice actors, people with great voices that would say, you know, and they were all, you know, for example, somebody from Quebec that would say, well, if you need somebody who speaks French, then I'm your guy. And we're like, okay, I guess we might need somebody who speaks French for the voiceovers in Quebec. And then there was a pirate fellow, and I will spare you my pirate impersonation because it actually sounds a lot more like Sean Connery. But nonetheless, there were people from all around North America that asked to be on our website. And being pretty low-tech, frankly, operating out of our home studio apartment, if you will, we actually wrote the names down of all of our initial customers on this giant whiteboard. And one of the other things that we kind of, and soon enough, we started to build relationships with people. And that website grew over time to becoming the largest marketplace for voice actors. Now, we actually didn't start as voices.com. A bit of an interesting story happened because we started as interactivevoices.com, which is a bit of a mouthful in and of itself. And everybody had their own profile on there. For example, janicedowns.interactivevoices.com. I'm getting tired just saying it ourselves. And the tipping point was somebody actually complained that their fingers got tired from typing out our website too long. I don't know why they just didn't bookmark it. But nonetheless, I was on a bit of a quest to change our name. You see, there were new websites coming online at this time called Flickr and Twitter, and they were all dropping vowels, and they all sounded very, very sophisticated, if you will. Well, I was on this quest to change the name. In fact, I actually put in a bid for Vox.com of $100,000. Now, I totally did not have $100,000, but that is besides the point. In fact, we looked at Vox and Voxy and Voxio, the Latin variations on the word voice. Well, it's turned out that that was kind of my first sign that this was just not working out. Maybe I had to settle. But I actually got some really great advice, which was to, again, never take no for an answer. Be persistent. I thought, well, maybe rather than a name rebranding and a name change, why don't we go for a name simplification? What if we could just get rid of that interactive part off the beginning and just be voices.com? Nice and simple and memorable. Well, being pretty savvy, I realized that if I kind of contacted that fellow as David at Interactive Voices, and they visited the website, we had about 10,000 customers at the time. Well, what I thought would happen was that maybe he would go to the website and realize that, hey, there's actually a real business here, and probably jack up the price. So I actually met a lawyer who moved into across the hall from us that very week, and I said, Phil, do you think you could send this fellow an email and ask him, would he sell his domain name, and if so, what price? You can actually do this now. This might even be a great tip for you. You can do a who is lookup. It's almost like a white pages lookup on any website to find out who owns that website. So if there's a name out there that you wanted to buy because it was important to you, it might already be registered. You can actually contact that person and buy the name itself. Well, this fellow came back and said that he would sell the name, and he said $50,000. And I thought, wow, well, good news is I just saved $50,000 because I was about to bid $100,000 on the other. But the bad news is I still totally did not have $50,000. I did what most entrepreneurs do. You go to what is called the 3 F's in fundraising: friends, family, and fools. Basically, anybody that's going to give you some money to invest into your new venture. Well, everybody said no, and I went to the banks, and they all said no. And I realized, well, again, that piece of advice, never taking no for an answer. What if I could go back to that fellow and say, well, how about instead of $50,000, how about $30,000? Still didn't have $30,000, so I'm quickly doing the math. I'll send the fellow $5,000 for the next 18 months, once every quarter, and 5 times 6 being $30,000. And you know what? He went for the deal. And for $5,000, which I think terribly foolishly, I did a cash advance on my credit card. Don't tell anyone I did that. We were able to obtain the name Voices.com, which was, looking back, the single biggest turning point. We've been learning so much about branding that, and the value of a name. There's a proverb that says a good name is more valuable than great riches. And I've been able to learn and live that one out and see that to be true. So speaking of our customers, in fact, our customers did start to come to us from all around the world. In fact, there's a story, yes, we had a great website, but we actually did something relatively low-tech as well. We put a toll-free phone number at the top of every single page on our website. This phone number went into, and this was again just Stephanie and I in our small little condo and our kind of little office in the dinette in the corner. That had this business line that had toll-free phone number piped into it. And whenever that phone would ring, we would look each other in the most panicked of all looks. Which one of us is going to answer the phone, and which one of us is going to grab the baby and run down the hall and muffle the crying in the background while the other person answered in the most professional of all voices. Thank you for calling voices.com. You've reached David. How can I help you? Now, what you don't know is that whether you pressed 1, 2, 3, or 4 for sales, customer service, or tech support, they all went to me. But we made it look like we were quite the large organization. We acquired customers, yes, using social channels, yes, using search and all forms of media. But it was actually the simplicity of the telephone and that toll-free phone number that actually kicked things off. More recently, however, is that we've had the opportunity to participate in the Canadian Technology Accelerator. It's an amazing program put on by the Canadian government that picks high potential entrepreneurs, which I'm grateful to be one. We did apply, and somehow I think somebody just like pulled a name out of a hat or something to get my name. In fact, that's my mom and dad told me after the fact, that's how they got my name. They had like 10 names and they couldn't decide. They put my name in a hat. I could have been like, I don't know, something random. I have no idea. I didn't even want to know what the other options were. But so this Canadian Technology Accelerator, they selected us to go down initially to Silicon Valley, and then in 2013, and learn from the tech companies there, Google and Facebook and Twitter, actually going to those locations. And then more recently into New York City, where we've been living there for the last six months, much of last year. But of course, London, Ontario is now where we call home. That initial idea that Stephanie and I jotted down on a napkin 10 years ago has grown into a very large organization where we employ over 100 people that are across sales and marketing and service. And so here I'm wanting to give you kind of what I think has been kind of that killer competitive advantage, that unfair advantage, that despite all of the ideas that are out there and all the competitors that are there, how is it that we've broken through, and how is it that you can do the same way? Now, a little bit of a contrarian message, to be honest, because we're talking about kind of an abstract idea, that of corporate culture, or creating culture, if you will. Now, before you're thinking that this is such an abstract idea, let me give you some initial thoughts, because it means different things to different people. You might be thinking, well, you know, in everyday speak, you know, we can say that someone is cultured. That's kind of this air of sophistication about them. Or you might say in kind of business speak that we have a great kind of corporate culture. It might be talking about kind of the values that you hold, a value of innovation, or that we have this kind of culture of excellence. Certainly those are all true. But what is more intriguing to this idea of creating culture is that it's almost invisible to the eye. It's kind of just flows right below the surface. But you know what? It is the thing that makes things different within every organization. You know it when you walk into a company, whether it's the floral shop or the pizza shop, or into a hotel or a restaurant, or on an airline, as we've heard yesterday. That culture is how people behave, and it emanates out from your entire team. Now, if I could just throw up a quick definition, I would say that what I'm going to share with you over the next kind of 20, 30 minutes or so is that culture is a product of learned experiences. What's taken me 10 years, which I have to admit because it's been a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, mostly tears, is that these learned experiences you'll be able to glean in the next few minutes. So first off, that culture states these aspirational values. So and they often come from the founder. Next up is that culture describes this kind of expected behavior. If you've ever been new into an organization, you'll know that it's kind of like a way we do things around here. And it's often hard to kind of break those cultural barriers, if you will, sometimes. But if you can kind of, as a leader within your organization, and certainly the fact that you're even here in this room, you should consider yourselves a leader. You have that power to shape what that expected behavior is. And finally, what most people think of corporate culture, especially in the technology scene and technology landscape, it does reveal itself in these tangible artifacts. So we'll kind of very quickly touch on each of those. Now, you might be looking like my friend Ken. Ken is probably thinking, well, why do I need to bother with this stuff? I thought it was a digital media conference. We were going to be talking about search and social and mobile and video. We've covered a lot of that. But I want to show you how is it that you can apply this within your organization to get the buy-in from other people. So first off, yeah, why bother? I hear you. I right off the top mentioned that it is definitely seen as that ultimate advantage. You probably have these cultural phenomena, if you will, already occurring within your organization. So I'm going to help you recognize those. I'll give you some fresh ideas. It's things that I've learned from being at these co-working spaces, being at offices at tech companies and large institutions, again, in Silicon Valley and New York, and ultimately with the hope and desire that you will be creating a high-performing team. Now, before we get too far, I think there's some of you might be feeling like Janine, putting up the hand and thinking, well, what are you not going to hear? This sounds like it's going to be really expensive, or it's kind of airy-fairy and fluffy stuff. Well, what you're not going to hear is that there aren't any quick fixes. In fact, there aren't quick fixes. I know a lot of you work in these, entrenched industries or entrenched organizations. And certainly tech is probably predisposed more than any other to be kind of changing and being a little bit more nimble. But even the use of technology, like we heard from some of our panelists this morning, I think demonstrates that you can make changes happen within your organization. I'm not going to tell you how to run your company or your organization, only you know how to do that. And I certainly won't be insisting on beanbag chairs, napping pods like at Google, or replacing your boardroom tables with foosball tables. Although that is tremendously fun over the lunch hour, I won't be giving you any silver bullets because there are none. So there are a series of cultural phenomenon that we'll walk through, and I should mention that one wonderful lady, Cornelia, has taken these photos from around the office, so hopefully gives you a bit of a flavor for our company. So if we walk through these building blocks, the first one is that being of values. Now, I'm going to try something new, and I know it's dark in here, so you should feel like it's a safe environment. But if you were to just close your eyes for a moment, and I want everyone, without looking at your neighbors, to point north. Where's north? I saw somebody do this, right? Values. I think, yeah, you guys have it. And what did we use? We used landmarks. I bet you guys used landmarks. I bet you realized the orientation of the airport, the highway. All of these things almost kind of ground us into knowing which direction we should be heading, right? And values certainly hold that same kind of connotation. Values are those shared principles that people hold in high esteem. If there's anything that you've probably seen firsthand, somebody gave me this great advice, and you've probably seen it play out in your organization. As does the leader, so goes the organization, right? If you, the founder of a company, for instance, there's a story around Sam Walton, the founder of Walmart. In fact, he visited personally every single one of the Walmart stores and actually got down on his hands and knees and measured the distance of the shopping cart aisles to ensure that there was enough space that two moms or two dads could cross each other. There was space for the cart and a kid beside it as well, too. Isn't that amazing? That just shows you the level of detail and commitment that they have to their customers. Every business has them, likely established by their founder, yes. So somebody who values innovation is going to be kind of demonstrating that out to the team. Also tells people within the organization, again, whether it's a startup or a much larger group, whether they should risk sharing an idea or it should be hidden. I'm sure you all have great ideas, but you might even be wondering what to do with it. I think the culture comes to that. And if the values that you have in an organization, and you should be clear on what those are, will kind of determine that. And lastly, tells your team or you whether you should surface a problem and talk about it and resolve it, or you should probably sweep that on the rug, and maybe, hopefully, nobody will notice. Well, fact is, somebody will eventually notice, right? So if I can kind of give you some examples of some values, The first one being that of innovation. Now, all of you are considered, I would certainly consider you innovators in your own right. Now, innovation doesn't need to mean that you're changing the world. It can actually mean maybe that you're influencing. It can mean not necessarily that you're solving an incurable disease, but instead there can be some really simple things. If you think, for example, this concept of responsive web design, where your website dynamically adjusts depending on the size and the resolution of the mobile devices that people are working on, that would be considered tremendously innovative, probably in a lot of organizations. The fact that Stephanie and I thought far enough, what would our customers want? To put that toll-free phone number at the top of the website to be able to answer that. Phone calls from our customers, that was, again, considered innovative. Growth, a company that values growth would be really driving forward new ideas, putting those into place, investing profits back into the company in the future. And then finally, integrity. Knowing the right thing to do and ultimately doing it. So those are some ideas of single word values that might be in your organization. In fact, there was a story of a tech company in Silicon Valley that sold insurance on behalf of the government, and they actually had to do this government training, okay? And all the employees selling the insurance needed to be certified. Well, their founder thought it was a smart idea to actually write an automated computer program to pretend that their employees were doing the training, 57 hours worth of legalized mandated training. And so this program was installed on all the employees' computers, and it would run behind the scenes even when the employees weren't even there to simulate as if they were getting this training done. Well, you don't think that that's going to eventually be caught out? Of course it was, and it was a terrible scene in the media, and that founder who founded the company eventually lost his job as the chief executive officer and was replaced with someone else. Well, the new CEO comes in and says the very first thing that we need to instill is integrity. We have to abide by the laws. We have to ramp up on our compliance. Man, that guy's probably got a tremendously difficult job ahead of him because there's probably a culture where the rules don't matter. But it does need to start at the top, which is, and I hope they certainly turn things around because it's a very, very promising tech company. So as goes the leader, so goes the organization. So how do you actually kind of filter this, if you will? If values serve as that filter, and if anyone is in human resources or has the good fortune of actually interviewing and hiring other people, you should consider what's called values-based hiring. So start by asking some tough questions of your candidates. So if you had that innovation of the value of innovation, and I've actually kind of lifted this right from Google themselves, you can go on Glassdoor, a website where employers and candidates actually look at other interview questions from other employers. And so there was asked, what is a tough problem that you faced, and how did you solve it? So asking even what is a tough problem, somebody, if they thought something kind of overly simplistic was tough, then maybe Google, they're not kind of a good fit for Google. And then ultimately, how did you solve it as well too? So asking those questions, for example, the value of growth, if you were to have that values-based discussion, what sacrifices are you willing to make? And are you even willing to make sacrifices in order to reach your personal goals and maybe the goals of the company? And then lastly, that of integrity. When is it right to lie versus telling the truth? If you ever want to see a candidate squirm in their seat at an interview, just ask that question. And in fact, the answer is never. It is never right to lie, right? But if you see people kind of weaving away, there's probably not going to be a good cultural fit. So there you have it, our first building block out of the way, and we'll kind of zip right along. So if the values are kind of stated, there's also language, written and verbal communication as well. And it's not just the written communication, but it's obviously the body language. So if you think of language as the highway upon which communication travels, there are those three different forms. The visual, the body language, my hand gestures. You can even imagine, how many of you probably picture Sam Walton down on his hands and knees as I stretched out the measuring tape there. So I think body language is important to be considerate of. Then there are actually the words that you use. Again, if the values are ingrained within your culture, then that's how you communicate ideas. And then lastly, the vocal or the tone in which something is said. My wife lovingly reminds me that it's not what you say, it's how you say it that is important. And so out of those three, I'm sure you've all seen this before, but experts say that who thinks that visual, this kind of body language, is the most important form of communication? Any show of hands? A few? How about the actual words that we use? Anyone? No takers. And then lastly, vocal. Our tone, right? So experts say that it's actually body language is by far the most, followed by the tone, which you can still get up over a phone, and the words that you say actually aren't that meaningful. So that is terribly shocking. And I'll give you a demonstration of the tone as well. So this is, I'll read this out. I didn't tell her you were stupid. 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 Can you see how that sentence has 7 different ways of being interpreted? That's why it's so difficult to communicate on social media. You do not have the body language or the visual, and you also don't have the tone. So be tremendously careful for the few words that you do have, so that they run through that filter of almost italicizing every single word in that sentence. Now, speaking of the words themselves and the tools that we use at voices.com to improve communication amongst the 100 employees is actually recognizing that we needed a jargon list. In fact, every organization has almost their own lexicon of words that they've developed that mean something to them but might not mean the same thing to everybody else. This actually came about because I was looking in our customer relationship system. Fortunately, we've moved off of jotting names down on the whiteboard into an actual computer system now. And I was looking at a customer, recording of a customer call. And the call notes on that said, "OOO." I thought, that's weird. And I actually had to go to our own jargon list to realize that that was shorthand for out of office. Same thing with LVM, left voicemail. I didn't even know what this stuff meant. But we have other things like a lead is something very specific in our system. So consider creating a jargon list as another tool that you might, an idea that you can add into as a takeaway here. But where this all comes together within our organization is that of the daily huddle. There's probably huddles of various kinds or team meetings, but the huddle for us is the one moment of the day where we find that it's a very high impact and powerful session. So I'll just kind of quickly run through this. In fact, yes, it actually happens every day. You wouldn't believe the amount of information and customer stories that we need to disseminate within the company. It happens at 11:50 because I found that that was actually the magical time that surprisingly everybody's actually in the office right before they take a break for lunch. So 11:50 is actually scientific. There's a couple roles. There's the huddle master who kind of serves as like the cat wrangler to kind of bring everybody in and serve as the moderator to keep the whole thing going. And then there are the scribes, the people who kind of take the notes, and it actually gets posted to our own internal social network. But every day we run through this agenda that gets the team engaged. That of good news. Maybe we're up for an award. Maybe somebody new joined the company. Maybe our name's in the newspaper. Then we move into our numbers. The numbers, yes, our key performance indicators are all in the computer system, but there is something tremendously valuable, thinking back to the body language and the tone of voice, of reporting those numbers verbally into a group of your peers. So we drive accountability that way. We also go through the systems. We actually started these off as calling them broken systems, but that was tremendously negative. So we just call them systems now. And these are systems of operation within the organization. It could be technical, yes. Maybe there was a dropped phone call. Maybe the email's not working. Somebody posted something very nasty on to us on social media. How do we respond to that? And we highlight these. We just surface what the issue is. But it could be very non-technical as well, too. A company favorite is actually that there's something tremendously stinky in the fridge, and that kind of fridge clean-out day, you know what I'm talking about. The fridge clean-out day has to happen a little sooner than later. So all of these things, if left untouched, will go on to create a bit of a poisonous atmosphere. So we raise them up and then solve them promptly. Finally, we end off with upcoming, which were upcoming events. This huddle is like a 24-hour, news cycle, and it all get crammed into to those 10 minutes. So it might be somebody new coming into the office or training that's upcoming. So any of those upcoming events we discuss. And finally, we ended off with a thank you, a word of thanks, a quote, a joke. My son's jokes from when he was like 10 are classic. They get I will spare you. Again, I will spare you. But usually they're customer love letters that get read out because too often those don't get shared with each other, right? So we read those out. So that's kind of how we bring this communication piece together. We use language that becomes familiar with new people joining the organization, and we actually get to see each other face to face. But the real reason why we hold the daily huddle is because, the good news is that we've grown to the point that we're on 2 floors. But unfortunately, we don't always see each other. So by having the huddle, it forces these collision moments to happen, where I can say, hey, Kevin, there's something I've been meaning to talk to you about, and then capture that moment and drive the agenda forward. So there you have it. That's values and language. And then speaking of kind of those performance standards and key performance indicators, then we move on to expectations. Now this is probably where we get into that nebulous land of kind of it being a little bit out there because too often companies of all sizes aren't clear on what they expect of each other. In fact, this is probably even where a lot of relationships break down. But there are, in the corporate world, there are performance standards that are set, that kind of set the expectations of how we behave, the norms of behaviors that create this climate of trust, where I can trust you to do your job because you're going to also trust me to do mine. So those expectations, if you will, take a couple forms. The first one being the lowly job description. Now, there's a couple ways that you can do this. When Stephanie and I first started, and I know I used that phrase at the beginning of all my stories because there were so many good things that we got right that we've actually just held on to for dear life as the company has been on this rocket ship ride. One of the things was actually the one-page job description. In fact, we started both on one page with a line down the middle, and I said, Steph, here's your name, here's my name. Now we're going to write out each other's strengths and weaknesses. And I'm surprised we're still married after all this time, but we made it through. And we wrote them out, and we also said, which area did each of us want to work on? So for instance, myself being the engineer and driving forward kind of the financing and fundraising of the company, and Stephanie that on public relations and customer service. And so kind of having that delineation, just in a few words, has gone and served as kind of that defining document. And now, yes, there's long job descriptions, but everybody in the company has a one-line job description to stay grounded, to know when all else fails, what is it that I need to do? So customer service is I need to serve the needs of our customers, whatever that means, right? Or sales, I need to bring in revenue dollars, right, to keep them focused on that. Speaking of expectations, again, sometimes they are stated very clearly in terms of performance standards. So for us, we return every phone call, of which we get hundreds, if not thousands every day. We return every phone call, voicemail, or email within 12 hours or less. That is the performance standard. And at one point, we were just kind of solely focused on North America, and we were thinking that the only hours that mattered were the hours in which we were in the office. Totally neglecting the fact that somebody is at home sending us an email and the clock is starting for them. Not, or let alone somebody being on the other end of the world and they're in the office, they're expecting us to respond. And we thought it was great that we were like in this 8 hours or 12 hours. So we realized that just like Scott mentioned yesterday about how immediacy is so important in this world, that speed becomes our critical success factor. And then lastly, accountability is achieved with the dreaded performance reviews, and I've got a kind of a bit of a twist on that one too. So having, as I mentioned, with that opportunity to be in Silicon Valley, I also there was hooked up with a director of marketing from Facebook who served as my mentor through this period. And we created this 3 kind of word formula that outlined the various strategic activities: market, sell, and service. That's like the mantra over everything that we do at Voices. So on the marketing, sure, we're going to be advertising online, we're going to be engaged in social media. Selling, we're going to be direct selling to our customers over the phone. In fact, Stephanie and I wrote on that same whiteboard, phone calls close deals. Customers sometimes just need to talk to you to make sure that there is a real person behind the website, that it is not some Autobot machine from Transformers. Then the aspect of servicing having those service levels is certainly important. So the way we drive performance and communicate those expectations is something very simple called the one metric that matters, expressed as a key performance indicator. The one metric for marketing is new leads. You know, if you can keep your marketing efforts on one thing and measure all of the efforts and everything we've talked about over the last 2 days on one single metric that matters, it helps you overcome that sense of being overwhelmed with too many possibilities. Instead, you're just measuring how many new leads or new inquiries am I getting into my business. Same thing, the best way to measure your sales efforts are from dollars. And then lastly, we also send out customer satisfaction scores, which I would encourage you to do as well. So we get all that together to set some goals across that. And if you were to ask anybody in our company what our goals are across market, sell, and service, everybody would know, well, not those numbers, they're a bit different, but everybody would know the numbers. And so being clear about what you're actually trying to achieve does certainly support and explain those expectations. Something else in terms of how we've been able to create this climate of trust and this sense of culture and sense of belonging is putting everyone in our company to the best of our abilities as being the star of the show. Teams get their own movie posters, and it outlines that big key initiative that we're working on. It might be translating our website into Spanish so that we can better serve the Latin American market. We wanted to sell $100,000 in this new area of business, so we created a movie poster for that. And in fact, that response rate, how quickly we were replying to customers, which at one point ballooned to over 90 hours on average because there was a single support case that was assigned to me in my name, and I didn't even know it. And everyone was actually a little too nervous to kind of point out that it was in my name. As soon as we addressed that and did some other things, we were able to drive those numbers down and really celebrate our successes together. So why do you do this? That's great that you have goals, but then you got to track that progress. So we keep this really compelling scorecard so that we know how we're doing in real time. As I said, sure, the numbers are in Salesforce and these various computer systems and analytics and so forth. But by having this ClearBoard, which is actually a big piece of hockey rink glass supported by 2 beams on wheels, we actually keep all of our numbers there and talk about them daily. Now, it's only meant to serve as a pulse check on how the company. You're not going to manage your entire organization this way, but improves the communication from department to department. When marketing drives a lot of leads, the salespeople are happy. When the salespeople get a lot of sales, the customer salespeople or the customer service people are actually unhappy because that means they're likely going to have a lot more work. But we can see these dynamics in how the company is actually this living organism. So we basically, every day, we build this scorecard where Monday we report on the previous full business day, right? Because meeting at 11:50 to talk about the first 2.5 hours doesn't seem very effective. So we go through each of the days, and then lastly, we end up with a record or a total or tracking progress towards our goals. And literally, it is as simple as looking at our efforts across how are we doing in marketing, sales, and service. This is what has driven intense performance because we are intensely focused on those key performance indicators. Now, lastly, this is if that kind of occurs on a day-to-day basis and there's a bit of a rhythm that goes on there, you've probably all sat through the dreaded annual performance review. Well, we've realized that we needed to make a twist on this. With hiring 5 to 10 people every single month and growing the company as much as we have over the last year and continuing to do that, we realized we needed to ramp up how quickly we do performance reviews. There's 2 parts of it. Yes, everybody has individual goals, but along the way, and knowing what your individual goal is, how you contribute. We actually have this internal social network, and whenever I describe it in actually our interview process, it sounds terribly cheesy, but I assure you, everybody is on board with this. We have this internal social network where along the way, people can kind of spot good things that are going on and almost like post to your profile a kudos, a thank you. I appreciated your help on that. The idea being that come the end of the quarter, that 3-month period, we're not all scratching our heads trying to remember what on earth happened over the last 3 months, and you're digging through email to try to kind of justify the existence of how you've contributed to the organization. So instead, this happens in real time. And then there is that inevitably that performance review where it's actually a 360. There's a self-assessment, there's a peer review, There's a upwards review where you actually get to review your manager. I bet you many of you would love to do that. And then there's the manager's review. And we go through all of this information together. Why? Because we're trying to create a culture of trust, that of innovation, an environment where people want to share ideas. So ripping right along, we've talked about the first 3 pillars, and probably the most fun of all would be that of artifacts. The artifacts would be those tangible representations of the culture that often take these forms of those physical objects, if you will. So I've got kind of a few quick thoughts on that one as well, too. It creates an identity. Even if you're a 1 or 2 person company, there's probably a favorite little mascot or a toy that sits beside your desk. You might have a whiteboard where you jot all your ideas on. Those are all your cultural artifacts. As your company grows, you need to kind of hold on to what those are as well, too. So it eventually rolls out into the office design, your use of technology, the clothing that people wear, and then lastly, awards or flags or banners or other ways to kind of celebrate your success and the success of your company. So I've got some family photos, if you'll bear with me. Obviously, the physical office space, if it's, you've probably been into those offices where you went and it's really, really dark and you can't see anything and no one's talking to each other versus walking into a vibrant, well-lit, high-energy organization. I think the office space is tremendously important, as well as your use of technology. If you're a technology company, a design firm, or you work in web development, and it's almost like not on display, your clients might be wondering, how are you going to be servicing them? So having that technology on display. You can also have really embarrassing photos taken of your socks, or bring guitars to work. All of this is completely acceptable in an environment such as ours. But lastly, highlighting those successes of a team through the awards and achievements, and then those culmination events of celebrations. A quick story, and I'll end it off here, which is that of celebrations. In fact, we had a bit of a twist on the Bring Your Kids to Work Day. We figured it might be more fun because we read the research that said that 55% of parents have no idea what their kids actually do at work. They just think they Google things and they're working for Facebook. They have really no idea. And we read this on LinkedIn, and they actually pioneered this concept of a Bring Your Parents to Work Day. So we invited all the parents because generally, the team's pretty young. I think I'm like the oldest guy in the office, to be honest with you. And everybody brought their parents in. And so this is Stephanie's mom and dad, and they came in. We had them sit at the microphone and record fake movie trailers for Pixar. We gave them the tour around the office and taught them how to use a phone system and how to navigate through these various customer relationship databases and so forth. It was tremendous fun. And at the end of it, when I knew that we got the culture right, there was one mother in particular who came up to me and said, "Thank you so much for hiring my daughter." And I thought, wow, and I just, at a complete loss of words, I had nothing else to say but thank you for having her. So with that, thank you very much for having me, and this has been a wonderful experience. Thank you.
All right. Wow, fantastic story. Who wants to work for this guy? Hey? What a neat place, what a neat culture, what an innovative look at life, and you did have beanbag chairs.
Yeah.
I did notice that, so that is part of the, okay. I'm guessing there's a foosball table too. Any questions for David? Any questions? Everyone probably wants to give you their resume. What a fun place.
Hello, thank you. This question is not quite so much on your company and your company's culture, but it's one that's been bothering me, and I think you're well suited to answer it. When someone comes into your store and you want to collect their information, you want them on an email, you want them on a mailing list, or they phone you, or they contact you, what is the easiest or best way to gain that trust so they want to give you that information so you can contact them again?
Well, we've all walked into stores and been asked, "Oh, can I have your email address? Can I have your postal code?" I always ask why. Right? And if you can answer the question why, well, we send out a monthly newsletter. Nothing, might be a coupon, it might be a link to a special offer, a special event that we're holding, our annual Customer Appreciation Day, right? You gotta answer the question, why would they want to give you their email address or their phone number. And so I think by doing that, those people, that's my own filter. Those organizations and companies that answer that question correctly, that give kind of a valid reason, not just, oh, the marketing department wants it, or we would love to market to you. I mean, customers don't want to be marketed to, right? People want to buy, they don't want to be sold to. So understanding, if you can answer that question why, I think you would give somebody a tremendous amount of comfort. And even, taking it down, if it's not in an industry that is, again, powered by technology, even just having some, as simple as like a place to drop off business cards, that is a really good way to, you always see those like fish bowls, if you will, to drop off business cards. That is almost like you're not even asking. I bet you leave that out in your store or somebody else's store for a month, you probably fill that thing up with business cards and you didn't even have to ask once. But if you are asked, be sure that you have that answer to the question, why do you want this?
Any other questions for David? I should just leave a mic with you over here.
You're getting some exercise.
Hey, I know, it's the first exercise I've had in months. All right.
Hey, David. Great presentation.
Thank you.
When you have your daily huddles with your team, and you're speaking with the people that are manning the actual phones, your core team that is talking to the clients coming in, do they record the most frequently asked questions so that they can record that and put that on your FAQ page? Do you discuss things like that with your team so that you can actually address the pain points of what the client has?
Exactly. This is, we want to be responsive as much as possible. So one example, kind of a very, again, tangible way we were able to do that was we ran this initiative called Capture the No. And that was the idea that we should never be saying no to a customer or client. And anytime you found out that you were saying no, or somebody else, you overheard them saying no, you'd kind of quickly write this down and enter it into this almost like a raffle, if you will. And then we would read those out, because there's a much better way to answer a client's question than, no, we can't do that. It's literally like slamming the door in their face, right? It's like, that's a great idea. However, there's an alternative that might be a better solution for you. There's ways to phrase things, going back to the importance of language that you're using. There's ways to phrase things that can be responsive and turn things which could be a negative situation into a much more positive one. So absolutely, we talk about all those kind of burning issues, if you will.
Perfect. And just one more question. So digital assets, developing digital collateral for your clients is a real great way to make residual income for them on the back end. So with your voiceover artists, this is huge, right? If you have a client and you're developing this digital product for them, is there an ongoing licensing fee that you'd have to pay your VO?
That's actually one of the things that, if I may, that has been drastically different within the industry. In the old days, you certainly needed to have this like 13-week license. With Voices.com, everything is what's referred to as a full buyout. Basically, there's an unlimited worldwide usage of the recording. And why do we do that? All the talent have opted in as when they sign up for the terms of service. But why do they do that? Think about what we just heard today. You got to have a 2-minute video, you got to have a 30-second, you got to have a 15-second. You need all of these variations, and sometimes at the point of just recording or producing that video, you don't know all of those ways that it is likely going to be used. It might be broadcast, but it might be put to social media or online as well too. So by extending that concept of this full buyout, this unlimited usage to our clients, we found that we've been able to win over a lot of hearts that way as well.
Excellent. One last question at the back of the room here.
So you had mentioned that your organization had done some pretty amazing growth. And we're all familiar with growing pains. And that's not relegated to ourselves. The organizations also have them. How do you ensure positive organizational behavior and positive organizational culture during this time of growth?
Well, I think you need to go in eyes wide open, recognize that there are these natural breakpoints, right? and I'm not sure if, that everyone is going to experience the same ones, but certainly as companies go from, let's call it, 2 people to their first employee, that's a big change. And then usually when at that 20 employees, we found that it was really, really difficult. In fact, and why would that be? Well, because one person can communicate consistently with 20 people in terms of a management structure on an ongoing basis. Then at that, the next one would be 50 and then 100 and so forth. So it kind of staggers up. So if you go in with, as I say, eyes wide open, realizing that you're about to kind of cross one of those thresholds, you need to take special care to reiterate the values of the company. Why are we doing what we're doing? What is our, raison d'etre, if you will? So if you can have those kind of refresher with whether they're classes or lunch and learns or times where you get people together to circle back to the basics, I think that was, again, at least from personal experience, the way that we've been able to cross through those various challenging times. Great question.
Excellent. One last one. Is there one out there?
No.
Great opportunity. All right, another big hand for David.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Engage and the Anishinaabe Eski Development Fund would like to thank the sponsors of Engage 2016. TB Newswatch, TD Bank, T-Baytel, MNP, Shout Media,